Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video, this time talking about religion in Civ 5. Just a quick disclaimer, I play almost primarily multiplayer Civilization 5 versus other human opponents, playing in the No Quitters Steam group using the special rules that the No Quitters Steam group plays by. If you are looking for religion guide for single player, you're probably better to look elsewhere. A lot of the ideas in this guide translate to that, but this is mostly designed with the multiplayer community in mind, and there's going to be a lot of differences based on that. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. First off, why would you want a religion? This is maybe a good question. You have to invest in a shrine to get a religion. It can be an investment that you don't always want to make, especially early when you're rushing workers or military or settlers or things like this. And it's not always even guaranteed to get your religion. So why do you want a religion? There's a number of early benefits that come with the religion, often in forms of culture or production, but also things like happiness or even more culture from things like actually founding a religion. So there are some kind of early game benefits to that, and there's also a very notable late game benefit of being able to faith purchase great people, particularly great engineers and great scientists. And this is a mechanic that is something that other players who don't have decent faith generation can't do. Late game is a lot about bulbing scientists, about using scientists for their maximum science yield in a one-shot deal to quickly advance through the technology tree to get to very specific, often military techs. The way people tend to stockpile great scientists, you generate great scientists by great people points, and each great person you generate, a scientist, an engineer, or a merchant, they're linked. Every one that you generate ups the cost of the next one of that same type that you generate. So if you generate a merchant, your next scientist costs more, etc. By purchasing great people with faith, you can totally avoid the limitations that other players are restricted by. Not only do you get the same number of great people hard generated through great people points, but you also can, in addition to those great people, purchase people with great scientists and great engineers with faith that don't count towards that great person point generation system, which gives you an advantage in the late game that players who do not have strong faith generation cannot get to. So early game advantages in hammers, happiness, and culture, late game advantages in great people purchasing, and basically the indirect advantage of the science and happiness early is a better tech base for your civilization anyways. So how do you get a religion? First of all, you need to get a pantheon. A pantheon is generated by accumulating faith in your empire. The first pantheon goes for 6 faith, the second for 9, the third for 12, the fourth for 15, the fifth for 18, and the sixth for 21. This is again on a 6-way free-for-all, which is the type of game that this guide is designed to talk about. The thing about those faith costs are, if you notice, the second pantheon costs more than the third, and the third costs more than the second, etc. And what this means is if in simultaneous play, if two people, let's say 2 people meet 2 different faith city-states on the same turn, so they each get 8 faith for meeting a city-state that hasn't been met, a faith city-state but hasn't been met by anybody else. At the beginning of the next turn, they're each given the option to found a pantheon. Whoever clicks first gets the pantheon, and the person who doesn't click first, he now has a 9 faith cost pantheon, and he can no longer found a pantheon on that turn. So whenever you're founding a pantheon or even a religion or enhancing a religion, always be aware that you are competing with other players in a real-time environment, and that if you do not get your picks out first, they will get their picks out first, or have the potential to get their picks out first, and you may lose the option to even pick anything. I can't even begin to count the number of times that I've either lost Desert Faith by 1 turn or lost Desert Faith on the same turn because someone else is spam clicking that and I didn't click fast enough. So just be aware of that. So that's a pantheon. How do you get a pantheon? Well, from a pantheon we just talked about. How do you get a religion? Once you have a pantheon founded, the first person, well, when you reach 134 faith, you have a chance at a great profit. The chance at a great profit is a base chance of 5% plus 1% per faith that you have over 134. So if you have 154 faith accumulated, you have 5% base plus 20% over that 134. So you have a 25% chance on that turn of generating a profit. And let's say you're generating 1 faith per turn. The turn after that, you'd have a 26% chance at a profit. The turn after that, you have a 27%, etc., for that. So once you get your great profit generated, you have to be one of the first 4 people to found a religion. If 4 religions go and then you accumulate the faith to to generate a great profit, your great profit just will never spawn because you're no longer able to do that. So once four religions are founded in a 6-way free-for-all, you are done. There's no more religions available. There's only 4 people get it. So it's a first come, first served basis, and it's quite an impactful portion of the Civ gameplay. It's one of those resources like culture that especially newer players don't understand why it's so important. It's not as easily used as, for example, production or gold or something like that. It's a little harder to see why this is useful, but it has a very impactful has a very impactful influence on your game, especially in the late game. So let's talk a little bit about what you'd want to pick and why you'd want to pick that for religions. So let's go ahead and found. So let's say that you're Ethiopia and you have good faith resources, where this city doesn't, and you get your Pantheon out. Let's go ahead and get our Pantheon out. And you get your Stelae out, and then you immediately are given pretty quick option on a Pantheon. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for this. Let's go through. We're going to run through all the tenets, religious tenets in the game, starting with Pantheons, then moving into founder beliefs, follower beliefs, enhancer beliefs, and Reformation beliefs. We're going to try to do that relatively quickly. Unlike the civilizations, when I'm talking about the various bonuses the civs have in the various units, there actually isn't quite as much to talk about when it comes to religion, because the religions are a lot less, they're much more hit or miss. They're either good or bad, and it tends to be when they're good, it's fairly obvious why they're good, especially the Pantheons, because it's based on the terrain you're using. +1 culture from shrines is a fairly weak Pantheon. It only gives you 1 culture per shrine. Your number of shrines is limited by the number of cities in your empire, and 1 culture per shrine is not a whole lot of culture. Even early, it's not a whole lot of culture, and this becomes a pretty meaningless bonus towards the late game. You have to have a ton of cities to make this worthwhile, and if you have a ton of cities, there's probably Pantheons that are better for your overall empire than 1 culture per shrine. This is a fairly weak pickup. I don't really recommend it. Dance of the Aurora, also fairly bad. The problem is that the Tundra tiles you're likely to be working, especially early when the faith generation matters the most, are going to be Deer Tundra, which does give you faith, Wooded Deer Tundra, which doesn't give you faith, Tundra Hills, which do give you faith, and Lumber Mill Tundra, which doesn't give you faith. So basically half the tiles you'd want to work anyways, you don't get faith from, and the other Tundra tiles are pretty much unworkable. So it becomes very, very difficult to get a lot of faith from Tundra. Most of the time you're not going to be expanding to Tundra deliberately. You might have to found 1 or 2 cities in Tundra, but the bulk of your empire is probably not going to be in the Tundra abyss that you're stuck in, so you're just not going to get the faith you need from this. You can really think of Pantheons in 2 broad groups. The first group is a Pantheon designed to get you a religion. These are generally going to be faith-generating Pantheons. And the second group are Pantheons designed to give you early game bonuses, non-faith bonuses. So then maybe they'll give you a bonus to your culture game or your production game or your happiness game or something like this. And you're going to kind of see that split fairly well across these various Pantheons. And if it's a faith-based Pantheon, if that's the point of picking up the Pantheon, is to generate more faith so you're going to get a religion, you need it to be efficient at doing that, and this is not a particularly efficient way of generating faith. Desert Folklore is, however, one of the most efficient faith Pantheons. Basically, it's because the desert tiles you're working early are oasis tiles, are floodplain tiles, are desert hill tiles, and all these tiles are just fine to work, unlike the restrictions on the tundra tiles. And if you do manage to get something like Petra or multiple cities in desert, where every single tile that you're working is giving you faith, this is a ton of faith, it's a ton of early faith, and it's very likely to get you religion. It's a very, very strong Pantheon. Earth Mother is another fairly strong Pantheon. If you have salt, you're guaranteed to be working salt. It's one of the most efficient early game resources, so of course you're going to be working salt, and because you're working a tile, you're getting the faith yield out of it. Copper and iron, also fairly good. On strategic balance, you're guaranteed iron in your capital. You tend to work that tile once you've researched iron tech, so that especially early as you're building settlers, because it has a very high production yield, and production is very important for getting your settlers out, so you tend to be working faith on that. And copper is a fairly strong resource. It's basically a hill that also gives you gold so often, and that a hill that you're probably going to prioritize improving as well, so it gives you even more production because you need the happiness from it. So you're very likely to be working copper as well. This becomes a fairly good faith-generating Pantheon, assuming you have multiples of these resources in your city. And since you're always guaranteed iron, you often have at least 2 or 3 of these resources in a city that's going to pick this up. Faith Healers is totally useless. This is one of those bonuses that isn't designed to give you faith. But the problem is it's a very situational, very limited bonus. It's only going to give you this healing if your unit does nothing else for that turn and is adjacent to your city. So it needs to be basically fortified, and at that point, it's just not a bonus that is going to be impactful enough in combat to matter. You can pick this up if you're really desperate and you're about to die, and yeah, and you want to be useless, because that's what that is. Fertility rights on the surface seems like it'd be fairly decent. Growth is really important because it is one of the primary contributors to your science game is your population, and growth is very, very important. However, this is 10% faster. When it says 10% faster growth rate, what it's actually doing is it's giving you 10% to your excess food. And excess food tends not to be very much. Your total food tends to be quite large for cities. Your excess food tends to be a lot smaller than your total food. And what this means is the modifier is not being applied to what you want it to be applied. If you have, let's say you have 10 food in your city, and you have 4 citizens, your citizens eat 8 of those 10 food. That means you only have 2 excess food, and that means fertility rights is only giving you 10% to the excess food, which really is not very much. God of Craftsmen, fairly weak, mostly because there's just better production pantheons out there. This is +1 production in cities with population of 3+. 1 hammer early is pretty significant, especially in multiple cities, but the problem is the 3+ population means that you're not going to get this for the very, very early portion of founding a new city. This is really just going to be +1 production in your capital, and with the addition of God King, there's just a better +1 production in your capital available to you. You don't see God of Craftsmen go very much anymore just because there's better pantheons out there. God of the Open Sky, it seems on the surface to be equally as bad as God of Craftsmen, but it really isn't. Mostly because pasture resources are very, very valuable early. Pasture resources are sheep, cattle, and horses. All those tiles have a high mix of production and growth, which are the tiles you're likely to be working in the early game anyways. So adding culture to that when you improve those tiles, which are going to be priority improvements anyways, because you're working the tile and therefore you're going to get the most benefit from improving the tile, is not a bad thing at all. Also, one culture is not a whole lot, but you tend to have a lot of pasture resources. You tend to settle towards cattle, towards horses, and towards sheep because they're valuable resources. And getting maybe like 10 or 12 culture across the 4 or 5 city empire is actually surprisingly meaningful. Now, this isn't going to get your religion on its own, so if you're going to try to protect your culture gain from this, you're going to have to get a religion another way. But if you can afford, excuse me, if you can afford to do this, this is not a bad way to, not a bad pantheon at all. God of the Sea is a fairly weak pantheon, mostly because of it requires an investment of fishing boats. And fishing boats are a lot of hammers in the early game. Yes, the fishing boat does provide a growth, +1 growth, and it's needed to connect coastal sea luxuries anyways. So sometimes you're going to be investing in these fishing boats anyways, and at that point, +1 hammer per fishing boat if you have a number of sea resources is fairly decent, but the problem is it's slow to get started, and you need a lot of them to make up for it. If you're not going to have the bonus early, because a small absolute bonus as opposed to a percent-based bonus is going to be better early when you don't have a lot of hammers in your capital as opposed to late or mid where you have a lot of hammers in your capital where that +1 production isn't as valuable. So to really get a lot of value out of this, you need a lot of coastal resources that you're going to be able to do this with, and you need another way to produce faith so you can keep this bonus later on when it's actually going to be being applied. God of War is fairly junk as a faith-generating pantheon goes. It's too inconsistent to get you to a religion in most cases. You have to be being swarmed with barbarians to really make this valuable, and at that point you're probably having a lot of struggles that you didn't need to be having if you just dealt with the barbarians. So probably isn't going to get you religion, and it tends to be fairly weak past the barbarian phase because you're just not killing a lot of units. And if you are killing a lot of units in range of your city, you're probably losing the game, so it may not be your highest priority to be stockpiling faith at that point. God King is surprisingly good, and it's surprisingly good because it's an immediate production, an immediate faith, and an immediate culture, an immediate science. The gold less so, but still I guess an immediate gold, but less important. That happens, all that happens is once you get your pantheon. You don't have to improve anything, you don't have to do anything, there's no special resources required, it's just always available. Sometimes you can even sneak a religion in off God King if you prioritize building shrines in your expands and your other players and your other opponents have weak faith generating pantheons or chosen pantheons that aren't faith based. You sometimes will get a religion just off of God King, especially if you get this really early. If you run into a religious city-state on turn 1 or turn 2 before anyone else does, and you get first pick of Pantheon, and you have nothing in your capital that looks like it's going to be particularly beneficial for you otherwise, it may be worth picking up just because of that early +1 hammer when you're only making 6 or 7 hammers in your capital is fairly significant and surprisingly good. Still not the best of Pantheons out there, but it can be good if you have nothing else available. Goddess of Festivals, I really don't like this. I mean, a mix of culture and faith sounds on the surface like it'd be quite good, and honestly, culture and faith is quite good. But the problem is it only applies to wine and incense tiles, and wine and incense tiles are very difficult to work early. Wine and incense is mostly a gold resource, so it has a little bit. If it's a plains, it has 1 growth and 1 production and then 3 gold, and if it's a grassland, it has 2 growth and 3 gold. And those tiles are not very efficient early game when you're really trying to maximize your growth or your production. So it's hard to work wine and incense early, and you need to be working. This is only a low amount of faith generation. This is 1 per wine and incense tile. You're probably not going to have all that many wine and incense tiles, maybe 4 or 5 across an empire, and that's a pretty high count. In which case, if you're going to try to get a religion off this, you need to work those tiles early. And if you're not going to get a religion, you're just trying to do it for the early culture, you still need to work those early. And it's very difficult to do that because you're not getting any production or growth out of those tiles. Goddess of Love is garbage. This is a small happiness bonus that is only applied in the mid-game when your cities are growing to at least population 6+, and it doesn't give you any ability to keep or maintain to generate religion. This is not useful. If you're going to take a happiness one, it should be earlier to be beneficial. Goddess of Protection, this is terrible. There's no reason to take this. Plus 30% increase in city ranged combat strength. Okay, great. Maybe as a I guess it's better than Faith Healers, but it's still pretty terrible. This is like a desperation play. If you suddenly have a Pantheon come available when you're being rushed and you have nothing else available, this might be something that might help a little tiny bit, but it's really not very good at all. Goddess of the Hunt is a fairly decent Pantheon, although it's a little bit slow for my liking. The decent part is this is plus absolute value, and it's an early absolute value, right? So if you have 2 or 3 camps or 3 or 4 camps in your capital, this is almost the equivalent of getting like a Hanging Gardens or something, but you get it as soon as you bother improving those camps. The downside, of course, is you have to improve the camps, and that may take quite a bit of worker time and trapping technology, so it's not an instant bonus when you get it, although it can be quite strong. The other downside is it won't get you religion, so unless you find some other way to get a religion, you will eventually lose this bonus, even if it's a nice bonus for your capital. But decent pickup for early game growth. Messenger of the Gods is a fairly decent Pantheon if you have a lot of cities and you can get city connections up quickly. You know, the case that everyone always is like, oh, Carthage could be so good with their free harbors and instant city connections if you can take Messenger of the Gods, and yeah, maybe no. Most of the time you're not going to get enough cities quick enough with the road connections out to this to have some sort of meaningful impact. This is quite good in like teamer games or 1v1s or games where you will have a lot of cities, a lot of cities, and a lot of city connections quite early. It's much harder to do this in free-for-all multiplayer to have any sort of meaningful impact. But that said, if you have 4 cities and they're all connected by roads, that's 8 science. In the early game, when you have something like 8 science anyways, or 8 to 10 science in the very early game, that's a pretty significant increase in science. So if you can find a way to get this to make this work for you, this can be a decent early game science lead, but it's not very impactful late game, and it's hard to get going in the early game efficiently. Monument to the Gods, fairly garbage. You do see people pick this up very rarely. If they're planning on doing a lot of wonder spamming and also are planning on not getting a religion, because you're basically not going to get a religion and occasionally you'll see someone try to combine this with like Stonehenge or something, but mostly it's just not very good because the percent production value to a very specific class of buildings or a very specific class of infrastructure isn't quite as good as the kind of all-around production bonus for the very early game. So you just don't see that happen very much. It's just not a very good Pantheon. One with Nature is actually an excellent Pantheon. A lot of the times when you're expanding to a natural wonder, you're expanding to that because it's already a faith wonder, in which case this makes it an even more efficient faith wonder, or because it has very good yields, right? You're expanding to Lake Victoria or Solomon's Mines or Kilimanjaro or something where it has decent tile yield already, and this just ups the tile yield. It makes working that tile that you're already going to be working more efficient, and it's actually a decent amount of faith to potentially get your religion. Plus 4 faith will often get you a religion, regardless of what the natural wonder was, even if it wasn't a faith wonder, although 4 faith will not always get you a religion. Oral Tradition, this is like a slightly worse God of the Open Sky, and it's like that because plantations are not the same basic reason that the wine incense one is a problem, right? It's that plantations are not easy to work early. You don't turn bananas into plantations. You always leave them uncut because they are better with the science yield later than they are in the early game, spending the time to remove the jungle and build a plantation. So you're going to be working banana tiles for sure, but you're not going to be working plantations on them because you're not going to convert them into plantations. And that begs the question of, well, what plantations will you be working early? And the answer is there aren't plantations that have a good mix of production and growth. So this becomes a fairly small culture bonus that is not going to be as common as the pasture bonus and is harder to work, so it just is not very good. Religious idols is actually quite decent. This is because gold and silver are very good to work early. They have high production yields with a bonus of gold, bonus of cash, and you're going to be working those quite a lot when you're building settlers or even sometimes building some buildings in your capital early. It's still a little bit slow for the same reason that it's not a pure faith game. So there are pure faith pantheons that are going to give their the people who have taken those pantheons better faith game. But you can get a religion with gold and silver pantheon if you prioritize some shrines and stuff like that. And the culture, of course, is a nice bonus, especially if you have a number of gold and silver throughout your empire. Then this culture bonus can be somewhat impactful. Religious settlements is a fairly bad bonus, 15% faster border growth. There's just too many other better things out there, either for getting a religion or getting early benefit, than 15% faster border growth. It's just not very good. Sacred Path is a little hard to use, mostly because the only jungle tile you're going to work early is a banana tile, or possibly citrus jungle. So, citrus or cocoa jungle. But you have to have tiles that support that, right? So the culture is nice, but there's not going to be a lot of tiles you're working that culture from. Later game, though, it's actually very powerful. If you can deal with the early game, somehow still get a religion and keep your pantheon around, then if you have a jungle capital or a jungle expands where you're going to be working them mostly as science cities, this now also gives culture. And since culture basically late game directly translates to more science, that can be basically even more science out of strong science terrain anyways. Sacred Waters is quite a bit better than the other happiness pantheon, but it's still not amazing. This is again a very popular pickup in the teamer or 1v1 world because you can have a lot of cities to gain this very small bonus from, but in the kind of six-way free-for-all tradition dominated games, you tend that bonus tends to be small enough that it's not particularly impactful. Stone circles here, 2 faith from quarries, is a fairly decent faith generating pantheon. The problem is it's a little bit slow. The tech to get to quarry improvement is not a luxury tech. So people don't tend to go that very often early. So it's going to be a little bit later to get the tech, which means it's a little later to get the faith improvement. And if you compare that to Natural Wonders, which is instant faith, you compare that to Desert Folklore, which is instant faith, you compare that to Dance of the Aurora, which is instant faith, you compare that to Earth Mother, which is instant faith, none of those faith generating pantheons require you actually improve the luxury or improve the tile that you're working to get the faith, while Stone Circles does. So this becomes basically the slowest of the pure faith of pantheon. So yes, it does give you faith, and yes, it's 2 instead of 1, but it requires you actually improve the tile, which none of the other ones actually require you to do. Sun God is probably the best non-faith oriented pantheon out there, assuming you have the resources to take advantage of that, for the same reason that these other faith generating ones are quite good. You don't have to improve the tiles to get the bonus, right? So your banana, your citrus, and your wheat resources instantly begin generating extra food for you, despite the fact that you don't have them improved, which is a very powerful bonus if you can get that up early when you don't have a worker, when you're still going to build a settler before your worker, before you've captured a worker, before anything. Your city just suddenly is growing faster than everybody else's city because it has more food. That's a very powerful pickup, and it's sometimes worth protecting if you can by getting a religion and some other means. Tears of the God is another very decent faith-generating pantheon, again, because you don't have to improve these to get the bonuses from that. The pearls part, not so much. Pearls are a very weak starting luxury. They're slow to improve. They're a coastal resource. They don't have a lot of high production or high food yields. They're a gold-oriented luxury. So they're basically the wine and incense of the sea, right? So the problem is that's not such a good bonus there, but if you have gems, Tears of the Gods is an amazing luxury, amazing pantheon, because the gems are very useful in the early game when you're going to need to accumulate that faith to get a religion. You're going to be working those tiles anyways for your production, and this is just even makes those tiles even sweeter. Okay. So those are the pantheons. So all right, you get your pantheon. Let's say you get a decent faith generating pantheon and you get a chance at a religion. So what do you end up getting? Well, let's go ahead and show the found religion options and take a look. You are able to customize your religion name right here. I almost never bother, and I never bother because I don't want to spend the time typing something and then lose my pick at religion because someone else is same turning me on religion and doesn't spend the time clicking that. For me, it just seems like it's the risk isn't worth the reward of having a name that I like, although I'd love to customize it. Sometimes it's just I'd rather make sure I get my beliefs picked and founded before I get same turn. I've been same turned on pantheons a million times in multiplayer. I've been same turned on religions not quite as many times, but enough times that I worry about it still. Especially if you're same turned on first religion or same turned on second religion, you're very, very, very salty about that. All right, let's talk about founder beliefs. Founder beliefs are the part of the religions that basically only benefit the person who actually founds the religion. They're not all made equal. There's basically one really good one and a couple that are situationally good, and then a couple that are situationally mediocre, basically, is how I'd look at that. Let's just do them in order. Ceremonial burial is situationally good. +1 global happiness for every 2 cities following this religion is great if you have a lot of cities following this, but it's extremely difficult to get a lot of cities following this. You need to be either very lucky in your faith generation, so you have crazy faith generation, or you need your opponents to be very, very slow at faith generation, and that combination tends not to arise. Neither of those tend to arise all that often. But if you can get this as a pickup when you know you're going to be spreading your religion everywhere, this can be good if you're trying to spam a lot of cities and do some sort of production-oriented strategy, of which there are some that kind of work, but kind of not. I find it hard to use efficiently in a way that's particularly impactful to the game. Church property is it's kind of right in the middle, right? This is a mediocre pickup at best. It's not a lot of gold unless you have 1 million cities, and if you have 1 million cities, you're better off using, and you're trying to get gold, you're better off using tithe. Because most times the cities you're encountering in a tradition-dominated game are large cities, so it's just this 2 gold per city is pretty minor. However, it is gold per city out of religion, and that's not bad. It generally goes around third, somewhere in the vicinity of second to third, third to fourth. It almost is always gone by the time a fourth religion goes. In other words, it's probably one of the top 4 picks out of the founder beliefs available. It's alright. The break-even point for church property and tithe is 8 citizens, clearly, if this is 2 per city, and this is 4 per 1 for every 4 citizens. Clearly it's 8 is when they're equal, so anything bigger than 8, tithe is better. Initiation rights, it looks better on paper than it actually is. It's modified by speed, so it's 66 gold on quick speed as opposed to 100. It's fairly weak. It's a one-time gold influx of not all that much gold, and requires the cities convert, so you can't always time it when you want to time it. It's banned in 1v1s because it's too powerful there, but in the free-for-all world, it's not all that powerful at all. Interfaith dialogue, never take this in multiplayer. It doesn't work. The amount of religion, the amount of science you can generate for the amount of faith you have to spend is very, very bad. It's not enough to waste your late game faith for doing that, and players aren't going to put up with it anyways. They'll steal your prophets, kill your missionaries, and etc., etc. You can't use this realistically. Don't even attempt it. It's a waste of your time. This is fairly bad too. It doesn't seem to make a lot of coherent sense. If your game revolves a lot about gaining influence with city-states, you're going to want them as allies, and resting influence is not very important when you're getting allies. You much more care about rate of decay and your actual influence as opposed to the resting influence. The only time this is going to be particularly good is if you have consulates in the patronage tree, and you have this ability, and you have Pledge to Protect, and that's possible to do, but even then, that just means a bunch of cities are friendly with you but not allied with you, and the minute they go allied with you, you're no longer getting any particular advantage out of this, except that you can't go back below friendship. Maybe that could be used by Siam, but even then, I feel like Siam probably wants to make ally city-states, not friend city-states, so, and it requires your religion be spread to them. I don't think this is very good at all. You almost never see that go in the games I play. Peace-loving is really bad. I've seen Cole Wayne Jones play around with this a little bit in his religion style games, but even he has not been able to make too much use of it, just because it has to spread all over the place for this to be useful, and then your opponents have to not war you, because it's for each non-enemy foreign city. The minute that opponent declares war on you, you lose all that happiness, so pretty bad. Pilgrimage, this is okay. It still doesn't go very often, just because you have to be in a position where your religion is going to be fairly dominant. If your religion is going to be fairly dominant, there's 2 better picks than pilgrimage to go for. This is maybe useful in a situation where you have a number of city-states that no one else is going to be pressuring with their religion, but you are, and you didn't get a chance at tithe, and you're not trying to, you don't think there's enough population to mess around with world church in those city-states, because city-states aren't all that great on population. Then maybe you want to get the faith out of it, but it tends just not to be as good as the other options out there. I don't see it go all that often either. Tithe is the clear best in class of the founder beliefs. Even if you don't spread it, it's still quite good because your cities, you tend to get large, a small number of very large cities that generate quite a bit of tithe gold, which is very, very nice. It denies it to other players. And if you do choose to spread your religion or attempt to spread your religion a lot or get your religion very well situated where it can spread all over the place, then it generates unbelievable amount of gold. I've seen, I just recently had a game with Joey and Yoris where, Tony and Yoris, sorry, where he was generating over 130 gold per turn with tithe, which is just nuts. That's so much. World Church is very similar to tithe, except it's every 5 followers instead of 4, and it doesn't count your own citizens, which is a big hit, right? So this is only in other civilizations. Arguably, culture on a 1-to-1 basis, culture is better than gold, and it's actually probably, you know, this is a 1 to 1.25, right? But it's still better. Like 1 culture is better than 1.25 gold. The problem is that it's not exactly that, because this requires that you're the bulk. If that's the comparison you're going to be making numerically, then it requires that the bulk of the people who are infected with your religion not be your followers. They have to be other people's followers, and that's a tough thing to make happen. Your religion has to be extraordinarily dominant, extraordinarily early for that to be a real thing. It's great if you can get that going, because that much culture is monstrous. That's a game-changing thing to have that much culture, but it's just a lot harder to use than tithe. So again, situationally very good. Just tithe is just always very good. It's very easy to use. So you tend to see people take tithe first. You tend to see church property go second or third, and then you tend to see people struggle with the 4th pick for a founder belief. All right, follower beliefs. Let's go through them pretty quickly. What you're going to find is there's a number of top tier follower beliefs and then just a number of kind of secondary tier follower beliefs. The top tier follower beliefs, in no particular order, are divine inspiration, pagodas, religious center, and religious community. And those are almost always the top 4 to go. As I say that, divine inspiration actually doesn't go anywhere near as much as it should, but it tends to go in the games the higher level games, because people really value that. So we'll talk about all the beliefs, and then we'll kind of talk about why those 4 that we just talked about are so high tier. Asceticism is totally fine. This is 1 happiness per city with a shrine that has at least 3 followers of the religion in it. You see this occasionally go on games where either someone is very, very late to religion, there's not a lot left, or when someone's enhancing and a lot of the better beliefs have gone. This is a mediocre belief, but it's not bad. It's often 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 happiness in your cities, and it's happiness that you don't have to do anything for. Most of your cities are probably going to have built shrines already, so the infrastructure is already there and existing, and it costs you very little to get that happiness, very instant happiness. But it's not a huge amount of happiness, so it's not all that impactful, but it's still decent. Cathedrals are fairly garbage. Basically, they're so garbage because mosques and pagodas are much better and cost the same amount of faith to purchase, but just do better things. The great work of art slot is not very valuable in the games that we play. If you are later trying a game where you are trying some sort of futurism or tourism game, you tend to have plenty of spots to put your great works of art because no one else prioritizes them all that highly. You just don't need cathedrals for that. Choral music is fairly good. It's just not the top tier tenet, just in the sense that 2 culture is quite valuable. This is 2 culture per temple. A lot of people are building temples in the games we play because a lot of people have realized how valuable faith is to the late game science, and having culture coming in off your temples is great. Tends not to be picked first because happiness tends to be a little bit better on a 1-to-1 basis, culture versus happiness. But it's quite a good pickup if you're doing some sort of enhancing belief and you're struggling, what am I going to pick? Well, this might be 10 to 12 or 8 to 12 faith in a tradition empire, or 8 to 12 culture, excuse me, in a tradition empire. Divine inspiration is quite amazing, but it's situationally amazing. If you can afford to build wonders, this makes your wonders even better. They already provide whatever the wonder does, plus the culture that comes in on most of the wonders, plus now they're also providing faith. It's extremely good. The problem is you have to be able to spam wonders or to have a decent number of wonders. I do occasionally see people take this to deny other players from taking it, because sometimes there's someone who's so clearly ahead in their ability to produce wonders that you don't want them getting divine inspiration, because you don't want them getting another 20 faith or something per turn just because they built all the good wonders already. But it's quite a strong one because it gives a pretty high yield for what it is for a follower belief. Feed the World is one of the worst ones available. It gives too little to be particularly meaningful. It's 2 food per city, and it's going to be, it requires you have shrines and temples built to even get the 2 food. Yeah, it's garbage. It's too little. 1 food is not equal to 1 culture, except very early. Guruship, 2 production if the city has a specialist. there's a much better production tenant available, and there's much better other tenants available. This is okay in some Liberty empires. If you have a lot of cities, 2 production per city is not too bad. If you have 4 cities and the cities are very high production cities anyways, +2 production is not all that useful. It just tends not to go very often because it's a very mediocre to low rated actual utility out of that. Holy Warriors is absolute garbage, never take this. The problem is units cost too much faith versus the faith to hammer ratio that the designers of Civ 5 have developed is much too high in how much faith they think things cost. In other words, you're not going to have enough faith to realistically purchase enough units to make this worthwhile. And if you do have that kind of faith, there's better things you could do with that faith than purchase overpriced units with it. So don't get this, it's garbage. This may even be worse than Holy Warriors, because at least maybe Holy Warriors you're dying and you have a little bit of faith, you can purchase 1 to 2 units and drag it out 2 more turns or something. This is just totally worthless. +1 faith for each amphitheater in your city if you have 3 followers in that city. Amphitheaters, you don't build amphitheaters till much later. 1 faith much later in the game is not impactful, especially not impactful if it's only like in 4 cities, and who cares? It's garbage. There's so many better follower beliefs. Never pick this up. Monasteries, they're situationally okay, but not that great. The problem is that the faith purchase buildings, so they're kind of weird, the buildings that you have to purchase with faith, right? Because they're an investment. They're a long-term investment in terms of how long before they pay themselves back and their faith cost, but they're also generating culture and happiness for you. And the problem is this one doesn't generate the happiness portion of it. So yes, you do you invest in a culture and a faith building, and it gives you a little bit +1 culture and +1 faith on your wine and incense tiles. But again, we've already talked about why it's hard to work wine and incense tiles. Yes, if you have goddess of festivals and you have monasteries, you're now really heavily focusing on working faith or wine and incense tiles, but wine and incense tiles are still bad for your empire in the sense of growth and production. So you better have good growth and production to make up for that so you can afford to work these tiles. And honestly, for the one, I would not trade 1 faith and 1 culture for 2 happiness. If I've ever had to choose between monasteries and pagodas, even if I had wine and incense, I'd still take pagodas because the 2 happiness is too valuable. Yeah, monasteries are a little bit cheaper, so there's not quite as high an investment for that, and they're situationally okay, but I don't recommend them. I don't find myself using them very often, but I really don't like wine and incense tiles, so I might be biased against them. Mosques are fairly decent. They're just not as good as pagodas. They trade 1 happiness for 1 faith, and that is not a good trade. The 1 happiness is much more valuable than 1 faith. However, sometimes if you're going a wide game which you're happiness starved anyways and culture starved anyways, if you can get pagodas and mosques, you might be able to afford to do that in a wide empire. Wide empires generate faith not more efficiently, just more of them. So they generate it's just as efficiently as tradition empires, and they have more cities to do it in. You might be able to afford both of these. Mostly in tradition games, you can't afford to have both pagodas and mosques in the same game because you'll too quickly get to the eras where the price of the pagodas and mosques goes up, and you won't be able to utilize both of your faith buildings before you're in eras where they're very, very expensive, and you want to start stockpiling your faith in later eras anyways. So you tend not to see games in which people pick double faith buildings, but you might see Liberty games or wide empire games where that would be valuable, and in which case mosques and pagodas together are quite good. But if you have to choose between the 2, choose pagodas. Pagodas are just better. That 1 happiness is much more valuable than the 1 faith. Alright, pagodas tends to be one of my 2 go-to picks. If I get first religion, I'm probably going to either pick pagodas or religious community. They're just both of them so strong that you're going to want one of the 2 if you have the option to do it. Peace Gardens is fairly decent. It's kind of middle to high tier for this. If you have the city types that can do this, then this is quite good. But what you need is both cities on fresh water, so you can actually build the garden, and unless you're Indonesia, of course, which they have a garden replacement, they can build this. This influences all their cities. But you need cities on fresh water to use this ability, and also you need cities with high enough production and high enough growth that they're actually going to want to have a garden in them to make that worthwhile. But still, it's fairly decent. 2 happiness is quite good. Religious art is terrible. Hermitage is a very late game building, and it provides 5 culture and 5 tourism. The hard tourism doesn't matter whatsoever, so that's non-meaningful. The tourism theming bonus you get from Hermitage can't be done in multiplayer unless you have people who are willingly trading to lose themselves the game, and no one ever does that, so you can't do that. And the culture bonus is too small for too late in the game to be meaningful. It's only 5 culture, and it's much later in the game. It's just not worth it. Don't ever go with that. Religious center. Temples provide 2 happiness in cities with 5 followers. This is quite good. A lot of people invest in temples anyways for their late game religion, faith purchasing of people. That's very, very strong anyways. And now not only do those temples give you the faith return that they were before, they're now also giving you 2 happiness each. This is quite a nice one too. It's not quite as good as Pagoda as a religious community, but you often see this go fairly soon, often 3rd religion, sometimes 2nd religion, almost always by 4th religion this is gone because it's quite strong. Religious community is amazing. It's very good for tall empires, and plus 15% production. It's centralized production. Centralized production is what you want in the sense that this is going to make the cities that already have high hammers, this is a percentage increase on what their high hammers are worth. That's great. It's especially great if you don't have enough faith to be purchasing faith building. So if maybe you got 1st religion by taking, maybe you took one of the early game bonuses like Sun God, and then you built Stonehenge, and Stonehenge doesn't really give you enough faith return to purchase pagodas efficiently. You're not gonna get enough faith to get all your pagodas out and still enhance. So instead, you take 2 passive beliefs like religious community and religious center or something like that, so that your faith is just being stockpiled, but you get a bunch of passive bonuses that help you very much in the early game, like early growth and then hammers, which is amazing. So this is a great pickup, especially great if you don't have a lot of faith return. Source of Plowshares is bad for the same reason that Fertility Rights is bad, but it also has an additional component of bad in it, which is if your city is not at war. So it's not 15% total growth, it's 15% excess food is converted into, so you get a bonus on your excess food, and excess food we've already talked about is nowhere near as good as total food. Temple of Artemis and I believe the Aztec Special Building affect total food. Everything else affects excess food, I believe. But anyways, let me not totally be right about that with the tradition finisher, but anyways, this amount here isn't a lot of actual food when it translates to the percentage of the excess, and then anyone can cancel this anytime they want by declaring war on you. And I've been in games where people basically, someone on the other side of the map declares war on you specifically so you can't get the bonus from Source of Plowshares. It's not worth taking. So, alright, those are the founder beliefs, talking about those. You'll notice that there are a number of like 6, maybe 4 to 6 quite good ones, maybe 4 really good ones, like 2 to 3 like okay ones, and a bunch of bad ones. That tends to mean if you're last religion and last enhance, you tend to get screwed on the follower beliefs. So just be aware of that. This is part of why rushing for the early religions is much more important than the later religions, because the early religion tenets are a lot better than the later religion tenets. Alright, so let's say we founded and we have low faith return, so we took religious community, and we wanted to deny people tithes. We're not expecting to spread. We just want a little bit of gold ourselves and deny it to other people. We founded that, and we get our profit, and our second profit, and we want to enhance. And we just we enhanced early, so we stole we stole a religious center from them. And what are we going to take for an enhancer belief? Well, there's a number of beliefs in here that are fairly decent. There's a lot of picks for enhancers. You most of the time will have something that is at least a little bit impactful for your cities on this. So let's talk about what's there. Defender of the Faith is fairly good. This is a 20% combat strength. I think it's within 2 tiles of your cities. That's really good on defense. And it doesn't affect your opponents. It's like a founder belief in that sense. So if you're, let's say your neighbor has, you have Defender of the Faith in your religion, and your neighbor has adopted your religion, and you're attacking your neighbor, his units don't get that defensive bonus. So you don't have to worry about it ever biting you in the ass. It only ever can help you. So that's that's a good thing. The downside, of course, is it's not a spreader belief, so it makes it harder for you to maintain this because other people's religions will pressure you at the same rate you're pressuring them, and maybe more so if they've taken one of the spreader beliefs, but it's fairly decent. Holy Order, this is okay. Missionaries and Inquisitors cost 30% less faith. If you need a cheap way to spread your religion, this may be a decent way to do it. It's not terrible anyways, it's okay. But there's better ones out there for various things. This is a pretty specific role, a specific time you want to take that. And that's if you're going to be actively spreading religion, not through passive pressure, but through missionary spam. And it's pretty rare that you have games where you missionary spam, because mostly the religion game is about getting good bonuses from your religion and then trying to stockpile faith for the late game. And you don't want to spend a bunch of faith spreading your religion unless there's some real big benefit to doing so, and we'll talk about that later. This is one of the passive ways of spreading religion. They're fairly decent for spreading religion. Religion spreads to cities 30% further away. If you guys don't know how religion spreads, we're going to talk a little bit about the mechanics in a minute. But basically, 10 tiles. If you're within 10 tiles of a holy city or 10 tiles of at least 2 non-holy cities that have a religion, you're getting pressured by that religion. This makes it go from 10 tiles to 13 tiles, so it can make, depending on the map layout, this may be one of the best ways to enhance passive spread. Depending on the map layout, this other one over here might be a better way to enhance passive spread, but it depends how the cities are oriented to each other, which is actually going to give more pressure. Just War is actually not very good. Defender of Faith is quite good. Just War is not that good at all, mostly because it's very hard to align your opponents having your religion and the opponents being the one that you're going to attack, and being near them. In the late eras, yeah, okay, someone has your religion on the other side of the world, you're hitting them with stealth bombers, but the stealth bomber doesn't get any bonus from that, so it doesn't matter. In the early game, you can't guarantee that the guy you want to attack has your religion, and even if you know you want to attack this guy, spreading your religion to him may be quite challenging because you can't move through his military units to do it, so you can't do it during the attack. If you're doing it during the attack and he's let you get directly adjacent to his cities, you're probably in pretty good shape anyways. You didn't need it. It's just hard to use efficiently, basically. Yeah, it's okay. Sometimes you can do it if you have a very dominant religion and are planning on some sort of conquest stuff. You can take a later enhance and enhance this after people have adopted your religion, but it's just tough to use. Messiah is quite strong, perhaps one of the most underrated ones. This is quite good, mostly because what you're doing with prophets, people don't seem to understand prophets that much. Prophets should be planted for holy sites almost exclusively. Holy sites are a very good way of investing in long-term faith generation, especially for the early ones, and if you're going into some sort of piety build, they also give culture and gold, but mostly they're a faith investment for the late game, and this lets you get more of them, so you can get even more faith in the late game. The 25% combat, the 25% conversion strength is totally irrelevant. You don't need that in prophets. The prophet mechanic doesn't need that. Basically, you're just investing in this for less faith. And we'll talk about the mechanics of missionaries, inquisitors, and prophets in a little bit. All right, missionary zeal, missionary conversion strength plus 25%. Don't get this. If you're going to spam missionaries, take this one instead, the cheaper ones and cheaper inquisitors. But don't take this one. This is garbage. Religious texts, and it's garbage because of the way missionary conversion works, right? Missionaries are very efficient at converting cities with no religion, and they're quite crap at converting converting cities with religions. So if you're trying to convert cities without religions, you don't need the strength bonus. Just take less faith for them, so you can get them, you can spam them earlier and easier, and then not have to worry about it. And if you're trying to convert cities with religions, you need to do it in a different way besides missionaries. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Religious text is the other spreader belief that's quite good. Depending on the map layout, it may be more efficient to have the 30% further away, but oftentimes it isn't, in which case just a 25% bonus spread or 50% at printing press is totally decent. This is a fine enhancer belief if you're trying to spread religion, or even to combat, perhaps, for example, if you have a small religion and you have bonuses that you really like, but you're being pressured by a more prevalent religion, you want to keep your religion in your cities, one of the ways you can do that is through something like religious texts. Religious unity. Religion spreads to friendly city-states at double the rate. This is fairly garbage. There's better ways to spread your religion to city-states than this, and this is specific only to city-states, when most of the times if you're trying to spread your religion, you want to spread it to everything, and if you're not trying to spread your religion, you don't really care if it gets to city-states or not, and you could just pick better, enhance your beliefs. Occasionally it's useful if you have a lot of city-states around you and you're trying to convert them quickly and you don't have a lot of faith production, but you're still trying to utilize this. Yeah, I've maybe used this a couple times in hundreds and hundreds of games of Civ. So, and this last one is totally worthless. It's modified by game speed as well, so it's only 33 faith instead of 50 on quick. And it's just, think about that. 33 faith means that if you expend 10 people, you get 330 faith. If you expend 20 people, you get 660 faith. It just isn't enough faith. You're better off if you're trying to stack faith and use great people. You're better off getting Messiah because it just provides more of that. And if you're not, and if Messiah is already gone and you're trying to do that, maybe this is okay. This is a small increase on your faith generation, but it seems to be a pretty weak increase compared to the other enhancer beliefs that are available, even though those aren't directly towards enhancing the religious gain, they're towards other things. I really don't recommend this ability, although I have taken it a few times and tried to use it. Alright, those are the enhancer beliefs. We have one more set of beliefs to explore, and then we can get onto some of the strategy-oriented side of this. So let's talk a little bit about the Reformation beliefs. There's only really two Reformation beliefs that you're going to see any play in, and hypothetically 3 to 4 could maybe see play, but it's just very unlikely the situations arise in which those occur. So let's talk about we'll talk about all of them, but we'll focus most of our time on the ones that are meaningful. Charitable missions could be fairly decent. There's also another policy in piety, or in patronage rather, called philanthropy, which is another bonus for gold gifts. So if you have a gold-oriented strategy and you're trying to control city-states, this of course is a big boost to that. The problem is it's very, very difficult to get enough points to go down 4 points into piety, plus 2 points in patronage, plus finishing tradition or liberty, and then still have enough points to get into rationalism in a timely manner. So it's very unlikely that you're going to see that combination of events occur. You'd have to have crazy culture, and if you have that crazy of a culture game, you're probably better off investing somewhere else in the cultural policies anyways. But maybe you could see that do some play. I've seen it maybe once or twice in all the games I've played. Evangelism, you never want to take this. This is worthless. It's not a perfect road, so it doesn't make them into great profits, and there's better beliefs to pick, and this is much too high of an investment in social policies to just get this ability. Heathen conversion, this is a gimmick strategy that I feel like someone was just like, oh, what could we do with Reformation beliefs? Let's do, we could take over barbs, and everyone's like, yeah, great, take over barbs. Like, can you imagine the number of times this would be useful? Like, there aren't a lot of barbarians spawning. You'd have to work so hard to like find an area that you could use to cultivate barbs, and then you'd have to work so hard to like actually like do something in terms of the timing on barbs to get units that would matter. This would be so difficult to use, and like it's going to be so minuscule the impact it has on your game. There's no way it's worth investing the culture to get a Reformation beliefs to pick this up. It's just, you're not going to be attacking players with hordes of like barbarian armies from like 20 eras ago. Like it'll be like you get into the info era, and you have like, and suddenly you have satellites, and you can see it on the map, and you're like, now my heathen conversion pays off. I'll move to that one island on the other side of the map that no one's been to that has 45 barbarian brutes and 1 barbarian knight, and we'll fight the stealth bombers together. It's like, I don't know what they're thinking with this. This is a joke tenet. Jesuit education is actually one of the 2 that I consider the strong Reformation beliefs. It's a little tricky to use because first of all, it requires a lot of faith generation. It's probably going to be something you see in a wide game, mostly because the wide game is the one that's going to benefit from this. They're going to have the faith generation to do this, and they're going to have the cities with the low production that are going to be doing this regularly. The problem is twofold. The first is it's really hard to get Reformation beliefs before universities. You pretty much do not have the time to fill out one of your full tradition or full liberty before, and then go into piety before universities. So most times you're going to have hard built your universities before you have the option to take this, which means it removes 1/3 of its abilities already, because you can't get 1/3 of the units in here that are going to be useful in timing. And the other problem is that it is something that, unlike almost every other belief that is a founder belief, an enhancer belief, or a Reformation belief, for some unknown reason your opponents are able to use Jesuit education. So if you spread your religion to opponent cities, they can also faith purchase universities, public schools, and research labs. And that's annoying, because if you're trying to use this to get a science advantage or to offset a production disadvantage of a multi-city wide empire, you really want this advantage to go to you and you alone. You don't want this advantage to go to you and the tradition guy who you're trying to compete with. And yes, it helps the tradition guy less than it helps you as a wide empire, but it still helps him quite a bit if he can insta-purchase his research labs and his public schools. You don't want this going to your opponent. That said, it can be decent if you're going some sort of military strategy where you're doing a lot of city conquering, because the problem with city conquering is you take over a lot of cities that are happiness hits to you and don't have a lot of infrastructure left because opponents have sold the buildings, or just taking it like twice or once or whatever, has lost a lot of the buildings in it, and it takes a while before those cities become productive science production or productive members of your empire. This allows you to flip cities quite quickly if they have your religion, but it can be difficult to get your religion to the areas you're trying to conquer. So it's situationally quite good. It's hard to use though, and it's hard to get out going quickly, and wide empires already suffer from culture, and it's a little hard, and it's an opportunity cost too, because if you pick up Jesuit education, you can't pick up Glory to God, and Glory to God is the other one that's really good, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So hard to use Jesuit education, but situationally it could be quite good. One of my favorite games I've ever played was a turn-based Civ game in which I went to war in the medieval era and didn't stop going to war the entire game, and I basically forced my religion down everyone's throat for the entirety of the game. I was Ethiopia, and as I conquered them, I would convert all their cities to my religion and buy universities, public schools, and research labs, which was great. Well, didn't make it to research labs, but universities and public schools eventually. Religious fervor, totally worthless for the same reason that Holy Warriors was worthless. The hammer to faith ratio is or rather the faith to hammer ratio is much, much too high. They overprice units for their faith value versus their hammer value. So this is going to be even worse in the later eras because it's even more pronounced there because units are much, much more hammer expensive. There's so many better ways to spend your faith than this. Don't ever do this. Sacred sites doesn't work, unfortunately. It's an interesting idea. It's very early game tourism that works from faith buildings, and the faith buildings are quite good in the sense that if you're going a wide empire, which you'd need to do to get any real benefit out of sacred sites, the faith buildings are really good. They provide happiness and culture and more faith than and all that's very good for your empire. The problem is it's not enough. It broadcasts, it's very heavily broadcast. So the minute you take a Reformation belief, everyone goes, ooh, Reformation belief, what do you take? Oh, sacred sites, he's trying tourism. And then this is before you even get any tourism. That's the first turn you're generating tourism, and it's counterable there in a lot of different ways. They can take your cities back, they can invest in culture, etc. And you need a lot of tourism sites, tourism buildings, and tourism cities to make this work. And even then, it tends to slow you down, right? The problem is you can't get it until you have 4 points in piety. You can't open piety because it doesn't have enough growth and culture in it to do that. So you pretty much have to open liberty or tradition. And if you're not finishing liberty or tradition, if you're, like, for example, taking republic, collective rule, and then heading down piety, it's really, you gimp your empire to do this, and it's not a guaranteed win, or not even close to a guaranteed win. It's too easy to compete with, and you just basically become irrelevant doing it. I've seen a Poland game, Lech 10 once did a Poland game where he did sacred sites early and transitioned into futurism, and that was fairly powerful, but it still didn't manage to win, and that was as Poland, which basically has double the number of, well, not double, but probably 50% more social policies than any other civ, and he had a fairly good game and still didn't manage to make that work. It was close, but not quite enough, and that was kind of cool, but that was only because he was Poland. No one else would have the cultural policies to actually do that, and the time sense that he did that. I think he also built Oracle and Parthenon or something too. So it was a very large set of unusual events occurring to make that even remotely possible, and it still didn't work. So I guess you might, and I have a number of games, like at least 2 or 3 games on my YouTube now, where I've attempted sacred site stuff, and it's never worked for me. It's just, it gimps you too hard doing this to do anything else. To the glory of God is quite a strong Reformation belief. This is probably the strongest Reformation belief. It's also the easiest to use. It doesn't have a situational bonus. It's just pretty much always good. But there are some bonuses, some situations in which it's particularly good and better than rationalism. So there's 2 ways to purchase great people. You can either fill out their corresponding social tree. So to purchase a great engineer, you finish tradition. To purchase a great merchant, you finish commerce. To purchase a great scientist, you finish rationalism. Or you can get glory of God, and that allows you to purchase all of them. The nice thing about getting the Reformation belief to the glory of God is that you can finish piety a lot sooner than you can finish rationalism. So this allows you to do timing pushes with scientists that other people can't do. If you have strong faith generation and stockpile faith and get to this belief early, you can do modern era or even atomic era pushes with things like battleships, nukes, or bombers, or yeah, pretty much those. Rushes that other people can't do. If you time it right, you can do them very soon. You can also do things like futurism rushes, where you can purchase the great writers and musicians, or even the scientists to get to the errors you need to do, or the text you need to do to try your futurism rushes. It's also really strong for wide empires, and this is one of the problems with Jesuit education, is that you can't have both of these, and they're both really good for wide empires, but Glory of God is probably better for wide empires than Jesuit education. And it's better because when you have liberty filled out, finishing liberty gives you no availability to use faith on great people. And then liberty suffers from, if you have a lot of cities of liberty, it suffers from culture generation. Social policies cost too much relative to the extra culture you're gaining from those new cities. So you can't often fill out rationalism as liberty. You need to take a couple policies and ideology for happiness, and you have a few filler policies in between liberty and when you get into rationalism, so you can't open rationalism right away. And when you do get in rationalism, you can't finish it. And that means you can't buy great engineers because you have liberty, not tradition. And you can't buy great scientists because you don't have rationalism finished, which means what the hell do you do with your faith in late game as liberty? And one of the answers to that is glory of God. If you can fill this out instead, you don't have to finish rationalism, although you lose a lot of bonuses not finishing it. You don't get the free tech, you don't get the gold from this. If you can't get into free thought, you lose the hard science, etc. But you make up for that to a limited degree by being able to purchase great scientists and great engineers still. So this can be a very strong Reformation belief. It's probably the strongest one available right now, although I think Jesuit education could potentially be very, very strong in some situations. So this is one of the better Reformation beliefs, if not the best. Underground sect is totally worthless. Your spies exert religious pressure on the cities that occupy. You don't get a spy until Renaissance, so that means you can start putting 9 pressure on a city that you have to invest your only spy in. Once you have the Renaissance era, and you've filled out your Reformation belief and piety. What a joke. Nine, seriously, 9 pressure, that's it. Like, it should, and even if it's double, if someone's gonna come back to me and be like, oh, it's 12 pressure, filthy or something, and I haven't tested this in ages, but let's say it was 100 pressure, it still wouldn't matter. It's still, the investment is ridiculous to put your spy there for that length of time, and it doesn't do anywhere near enough. It's garbage. It's garbage. Unity of the Prophets, this is also fairly bad. Just because of the opportunity cost, right? Like, it would be kind of cool if you had a religion that you were spreading everywhere that was super useful to you and not very useful to your opponents, and your opponents are like trying to fight this and they couldn't because you had this stuff that made your religion super hard to get rid of. But if you have a super wide empire that you're spreading religion to everybody, you want glory of God or you want Jesuit education. You don't want to pick up these other ones if you're going to enhance anyways. You have much better things you can be doing with your Reformation belief than Unity of Prophets. So, all right. So that gets us through all of the beliefs, all the religious beliefs in the game. I want to talk about a couple other things. How to spread your religion, some of the religion mechanics, and some common mistakes about religion, and also like when you should spread your religion versus when you shouldn't. Because a lot of times people spread their religions when they shouldn't, even if they pick a very good religion. They pick a very good religion and they don't spread it, or they pick a religion that's really designed to be spread, but they don't know how to spread it. And I have the same problem, right? Like, I am not particularly efficient in my religion games. It's one of the things that I've been working on over the past, I don't know, 6 months or so. And it's interesting to pick up strategies off other players, especially Cole Jones is very heavy on religious strategies, and to a lesser degree RBS is has taught me a lot about watching faith generation as a whole as an important resource. We'll talk a little bit about those for probably the rest of the duration of this video. So, a couple of things to think about. You shouldn't always spread your religion. Even if you have tithe, you shouldn't just always be going, oh, I'm going to spread my religion to all my neighbors and investing in missionaries and sending missionaries out and moving your great prophets around and asking your neighbors, hey, do you want my religion, or this kind of stuff. You should really be thinking about a number of other factors before you do this. You should be thinking about, what is your opponent's faith generation like? If your opponent has low faith generation, you have a religion that's faith intensive, like a religion with pagodas and mosques, there's a much higher reason for you to want to spread that religion to him, because your opponent is less likely to be able to utilize your religion than you are, and you probably have something built into it like World Church or tithe or burial sites or whatever it is, the +1 happiness for every 2 sites. You probably have a founder belief built into it that's going to, and maybe an enhancer belief built into it that's going to give you a benefit for spreading your religion, and your opponent is not able to take advantage of your religion in it itself. In that situation, that kind of situation when he's low faith and you have a high faith religion, that's a pretty good time to spread your religion, because he doesn't get the benefits you do, and you get the founder and enhancer beliefs benefits that you get from spreading that religion. On the flip side, let's say you have a very low faith religion. So let's say you have religious community. So if we go to the follower beliefs, I'm not sure if I can pull it up right now or not. I think I've already done my religion picks. Well, this would be a good example, what we have here, right? So sacred, this is what we can enhance to. Have we even enhanced yet? Let's enhance. So let's take a pretty good example of a time you should not be spreading your religion, or you should be very cautious of who you spread it to and when you do that. So let's say you had religious centers and let's say defender. Alright, so let's say this was our religion, and our religion was basically 15% follower production, 2 happiness from temples, and tithe, 1 gold for every 4 followers of this religion, and 20% combat strength in your friendly cities that follow our religion. This is a great religion. This is a really strong religion. It gives us production and happiness, and it gives us gold, and it does all of this at no cost to ourselves. We have to build temples, but we're probably going to build temples anyways, and it gives us defense. We get production. We just get production for being us, and we get gold for being us. There's nothing we have to do for this religion. This is a great religion. Now, it has tithe, and tithe gives you gold per turn for spreading to other players, but you're at the cost of this religion, spreading this religion, is you're giving everyone you spread it to 2 happiness that they can get just by building a temple, and everyone can build temples. And you're giving them 15% production just by spreading the religion to them. They just get. And you don't want to do that. And the way that religion's like, especially if you're actively spreading it, if you're spending faith to give them that religion, you're doing it wrong. Because you shouldn't be spreading benefits to your opponents that outweigh either that are equal to the benefits you're getting or that outweigh the benefits you're getting. You need to be giving them something that either hurts them and helps you, or helps you a lot more than it helps them before you're willing to spread that religion. That's the whole point of spreading religion, right? Is it's something that's supposed to enhance your game, not enhance your game equally with them. Now there are some exceptions to that. Let's say you're like you're in third place in the game and there's a real clear game leader, and or maybe you're in second place and you're like the third place guy is like, hey, can you give me your religion? You're like, if I don't get the help of third place, I'm screwed here, and I really need third place to have some more hammers so he can help me fight first place. Well, then maybe there's an exception to that rule, right? Maybe you want to spread a religion that helps you both, or helps him even more than or helps him as much as it helps you, because what you're trying to do is combat someone else. But a general rule of thumb is you don't want to be spending your faith to be helping someone else as much as it helps you, or more than it helps you, to spread that religion. So you should definitely be cautious of when you're spreading religion, because you don't want to be spreading a good religion that helps them too much. Don't use profits to spread religion. This is another thing I see kind of newer players do occasionally. Profits are too valuable as holy sites to be used to spread religion. Yes, the profit is the most efficient way to spread religion. So there's 3 ways to spread. Well, all right. Maybe we should take one step back and talk a little bit about how religion spreads. So religion spreads when a city becomes a holy site. So when it's the wrong way of putting that. When a religion is founded in a city, the city becomes the holy site for whatever religion you call it, right? So this would be the holy site for Taoism. And the way that works is any city within 10 tiles of this city, that's the base range, is going to receive 9 pressure per turn on quick speed. Now, what does the pressure mean? If a city has, every population that a city has 100 pressure for that population to be converted to your religion. So if a 1 pop city gets founded, let me just reveal the map real quick. We'll have to deal with the AI for just a second. So let's say I founded a city right here on this grassland hill here. It's going to have 9 pressure from my city here, because it's within 10 tiles of this holy site. My holy site for Taoism produces 9 pressure on that. The city itself, it's a 1 pop city, right? It's going to take 12 turns for that city to become religious, because 100 divided by 9 is 12. So, well, it's 12 and change, but 12 is the minimum number of turns it's going to take for that to convert that 1 population. If I have twice that, it's going to be, if I have twice the pressure, so if I have 2 cities in range of that city, and it's getting 18 pressure instead of 9, it's going to convert twice as quickly. A city becomes religious when 50% of its population is religious. There is one religion, basically, 50% or more. So if I have a 4 pop city, and it's at 1 religious follower, so it has 1 Taoist in it, it's not going to be a religious city yet. If it goes up to 2 Taoists, it's going to be a religious city as soon as it's over half the number of followers. And it can do that, so it's easy with, like, for example, a 1 pop city or a 3 pop city, right? A 3 pop city, if two of the followers are religious, it's enough. On a 1 pop city, if 1 of the followers is religious, it's enough. On a 4 pop city, it's a little weird. It seems to, I tested this morning and took a look at this. It seems to be you have to convert a certain amount past 2. So it goes up to 2 followers, and then you have to convert a little bit more, and I think it's like 2.5, or maybe it's just slightly over 2, but it doesn't have to get to 3 followers to flip. So you just need the majority of the citizens, and even you can have half a citizens. You can have 2.5 citizens be converted to your religion, even though if you mouse over it, it would just say 2 citizens converted to that. So you don't have to stagnate growth at 3 to grow up to convert a 4 pop city into a city of your religion. The way that you spread religion passively is you get your religion. Oh, there's another mechanic that's kind of weird. That's not really intuitive to this either. Let's say I had a city over here again. Let's pretend. We can even plant the city to make this visual a little bit easier. So let's do that. All right, we have this city over here, and let's go ahead, and we're going to give it some growth buildings to make this easier visual, because this is a weird mechanic and I want to describe this in a way that actually makes some sense. So let's go ahead and give it a aqueduct and a granary and a hospital too. So it should go, and we'll give it a medical lab. Let's make it quick on its growth, right? Okay. And let's set this city to pop. Where is it? Let's set the city to pop 3. and we'll put its followers. We'll give it 2 followers, just enough so it converts to our religion. All right. So now it's our religion. It's getting 9 pressure a turn, which means that it has, and we're going to grow this 2 turns. Let's just go ahead, choose my, I have to get these out of the way so I can do this. Okay. So really, to convert to 4 followers, to convert to 3 followers, really what should happen is it should take 12 turns, because it's only got 9 pressure on it from the holy site, the holy city of Taoism over here, right? But what's going to happen is when it grows here, it's going to get another follower. It's basically like when it has no other pressure on it from outside sources, when it's only being pressured by one religion, the people who are born in the city seem to be born of the religion that exists in that city already, which is part of how the growth mechanic works. So you don't have to convert all the citizens born in your cities every time they're born, because they're born into your religion. So let me see if I can demonstrate that. If this turn would ever end. There it goes, first turn, right? So, okay. So if you guys look, it was a 2 population. It did have 2 followers before, but when we went from population 3 to population 4, it should have taken 12 turns to get 1 extra growth in there. So if it was just pressure that gave us that extra follower, it would have taken 12 turns. It only took 3 turns, and that's because of the growth. And that's because your citizens are born into the religion you have if there's no other pressure on it. So if we look again, if we go up here, if we go to pop 5, from pop 4 to pop 5, right now we have 3 religious followers and we're pop 4. We go to pop 5, and we have now 4 religious followers. So this is one of the ways in which that if you get your religion out first, you can very quickly spread your religion, because your followers are being born and everybody else's city is they're being converted until they get their religion out, and then they're going to have to fight your conversion. And it's a much less efficient process of getting followers to have to fight an existing religion than it is if you have first religion and no one else to contest that. So part of what you're trying to do, if you're trying to spread your religion early, is you can do things like stagnate your city until it quickly flips. So if you have a 1-pop city, you hold off growth. It's going to take those 12 annoying turns for that first bit of pressure to reach it. But once it's converted, you can let it grow as much as you want, because it's going to keep growing with the followers involved in it. And then once you have a number of cities pressuring, and once you spread cities, if I expanded like again over here or something, and this city has it doesn't have to be there. And this city has 3 cities that are religious pressuring it. It's going to flip very quickly to my city. And it's games like that. You want a game on your first religion by a long shot. If you're going to try to do any sort of religious spread and have it be ridiculous, that's the type of things you want. And then you want a dense pocket of your cities all connected together, all pressuring each other and pressuring anything that gets planted near it, so the religion spreads very quickly to that. Alright, we're going to talk about the different ways you can convert a city. So if I plant a city over here, let's go have a look at this. So you may have noticed that prophets and missionaries have a combat, not a combat strength, it's a religious strength. And you may notice that if you leave a missionary in borders that you don't open borders on, if you leave it there over time, it's going to degrade in its efficiency, right? So it's going to lose, it's called attrition, it loses strength, and if it loses all of its strength, it dies. Well, let's talk about what that does. So I already told you that each population point has 100 resistance basically to your religion, and you have to convert it by the amount of pressure the city is being pressured per turn. So 1 population takes 12 turns, at 9 pressure. If you have 100 pressure, 1 population which has 100 resistance takes 1 turn because you're applying 100 pressure. Well, let's talk about a missionary. So let's pretend this city over here, Adwa, has wrong city. 11 pop. And we'll give it 12 pop because it's going to starve next turn. Well, let's give it 12 pop so it goes down to 11 in a minute. And let's say we send the missionary over there. And, alright. So next turn, right now, 0 followers, 9 pressure on it. It's going to go down to 11 pop next turn because it starves. But it's still 11 people in here. And I'm not sure why it has 1 follower. It shouldn't have 1 follower. Maybe it counted one of the growth tiles that way. But anyways, either way, we're going to convert 10 followers here because 100. It's 100 strength per follower, and there's this missionary applies 1,000 pressure to that right there. So if we look now, we have 10 followers because 10 followers got converted from that missionary. And that's what should happen with that. And that means that missionaries are very, very efficient. You don't need a prophet to spread your religion to a city that doesn't have another religion in it. It's not necessary. If you're spreading your religion to someone that has another city, another religion in it, that becomes a bit of a problem. You don't really want to be doing this because you don't want to waste your great profits with that. You want to plant your great profits for holy sites if possible. And if you're spreading to an opponent's empire who wants you to spread to them, and they have multiple religions in it, really you want to spread to just one of their cities and then make them pay the missionary cost of spreading to the rest of their cities. And if you're spreading to lots of multiple people, you don't want to do it with missionaries or great prophets anyways. You want to do it passively if at all possible, because that is the most efficient use of your faith, because you just do it by raw pressure from having cities everywhere. Really, missionaries are really good for spreading your religion to cities that have no religion at all, and to spreading them to your empire already, which is getting pressured every turn that is near your holy city. Your cities are getting pressured. You don't want to be spending missionaries. Let's say Babylon had founded a religion and they also had a competing religion. If I spend the missionary over there, it's almost going to be totally ineffectual, because what it's going to do is it's going to convert the Pantheon followers first, and then it's going to start unconverting his followers to make them my followers, and that's a really inefficient process. It's going to be at least twice as inefficient as this was, because I'm not converting followers with no religion, I'm converting followers, I have to unconvert them, then reconvert them to my religion, basically, as I believe how that mechanic works. The prophet is a little bit better in the sense that if you do use a prophet to convert, it removes all the followers of other religions first, and then applies the prophet's strength into a direct conversion into that city. And that's okay. That's a more efficient way than just spamming missionaries into it. But in reality, you don't want to be wasting profits that way if you can avoid it. Inquisitors, unfortunately, can only be used on your own cities, so you can't use them on opponent cities. But really, you should be trying to pressure passively if you at all can, and just using missionaries to seed important cities around it. So let's say, for example, that there aren't any city-states down here on this map because I have no city-states turned on. But let's say I had a couple cities around there was a couple city-states on this island over here, and I really wanted to convert Rio de Janeiro to my religion, and let's pretend it wasn't a capital, so it didn't have a religion of its own. And I really want to pressure it, but it has like someone else's religion in it, right? What I can do is I can just convert the city-states around it, and then just have this goes right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These two cities are in range, so it has 18 pressure on it. If I convert a city-state here and a city-state here, there's now 4 cities in range and it has 36 pressure. Now if I have another city over here and I have another city that's going to be even more, like up to 45 pressure, it's going to be really hard for the opponent's cities to actually have a chance of converting this. And there's a couple benefits to this, right? The first is if I do this early enough, I take over the entire map, and then I can design a religion to have some sort of benefit for being spread all over the place. Later game, let's say I have a religion that I'm not trying to spread everywhere on the map. I want it to take over people's cities because it's tithe-oriented, but I don't want to let them use the fact that it has pagodas built into it. Well, if I get a lot of pressure up and it takes a while for the city to flip, that's great for me, because basically he's going to be in a later era. He may be past medieval into Renaissance or modern. His pagodas are going to cost more. He's probably not going to have the faith to use it, or if he does have the faith to use it, it's going to be a less good investment for him than it was for me, because I got my pagodas up in the earlier ages, but I still get the tithe bonus later. So if you're going to be spreading a religion or designing a religion, you should be really cautious of, is it a religion I want to spread everywhere, and can I do that? And if I can't do that everywhere, what is the most efficient way for me to spread my religion that costs my opponents the most and costs me the least and helps me more than it helps them? Because I see people, I remember a couple games ago, I was playing with the Polish coalition of Tank and ACIU, and and ACIU came halfway across the map to spread his religion to Tank. And Tank was hammer leader, and ACIU's religion had religious communities in it. In other words, he went halfway across the map to give the game leader even more hammers. And it's like a facepalm moment. You're like, oh my God, why would you do this? Like, you're not helping you're helping yourself less than you're helping him. Like, not only not more, but absolutely less than you're helping him. So anyway, so that's one of the common mistakes I see with this. What else I want to talk about in terms of the rules? Trade routes can also be used to apply religious pressure, but are a bit trickier to use, because the way that trade routes work is a trade route that originates from a city has the pressure potential of the city it comes out of. But the problem is, if that city is already pressuring, the trade route does nothing. So because Abyss is in range of Rio de Janeiro here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it's 9 tiles away. If I sent the trade route from Addis to Rio, then what's going to happen is there's going to be no additional pressure, because the trade route pressure would be this city is already pressuring that city, and there would be no trade route pressure applied on top of that. Now, if this city was 12 or 13 tiles away and outside of range of the city, and I sent it like a coastal trade route, or I built roads so I could send a caravan to it, then it would apply pressure, but only because it's outside of the city as it is. Let's also talk about non-holy cities. So the Holy City always applies pressure to all cities around it, basically. But let's say this city is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This city is 13 tiles away. So Adwa does not actually pressure Babylon on its own. Even though it's telling me it does, but it doesn't. I might actually be straight out wrong about that. No, I am straight out wrong about that. Ignore that statement. It is actually being pressured by that. I had it in my mind for some reason that it required 2 cities there when it wasn't a holy site, but it clearly doesn't. This is being pressured from that. So don't worry about that one. Good, we caught that. Otherwise, I'm sure a number you would write about that to tell me. Let's see, holy cities, and I already talked about raising holy cities, I believe. So holy cities can't be raised this brings up another good thing though. So sometimes you do want to move your profit from your capital where it spawns. Your profit, the first profit you generate is always going to spawn in your capital. You can move a profit and plant it in a city that isn't your capital. And what that means is that the city you plant it in becomes your holy city as opposed to your capital. There's a couple advantages to that. The first advantage is that you can split your production up, basically. So if you want to build Borobudur, which is holy city only, you can build that in your capital. Or you can build that in the holy city only. You can build that in the city you expanded to and build another wonder in your capital, like Aegea or something like that. The second bonus is that it might be a placement issue. If this was my capital here and I really wanted to convert these cities to my religion, then I don't necessarily want to expand. I don't want to put my profit here because it's only going to convert 10 tiles out, and there's going to be like a radius like about there, and it's not going to put any pressure on there. Now I can instead, if I moved it from this city to over here and planted it here, this city is going to pressure over there, and that could be a good thing. But the downside is, just like you can be first turned on a pantheon, you can be first turned on a religion too, or first moved on a religion. So if you're trying to found a religion and like you want to walk your profit around, and it takes him 5 turns to get to the city he's going to. In those 5 turns, someone else can found a religion, and that's also 5 turns that you're not getting pressure. Holy cities can be removed. So if you capture a holy city, you cannot raise a holy city, but you can bring an inquisitor around and remove holy city status and then raise the city. So if you've taken over some particularly crappy city that you can't seem to get rid of, and you'd really just like to burn it, but you're not allowed to burn it because it's a holy city, you can use an inquisitor to do that. What else? Oh, you can capture enemy profits. So if you see a player running around with a prophet trying to convert cities with a prophet and the prophet's unescorted, you can go grab that prophet. If the prophet hasn't used any of his charges, so if he still has all 4 of his conversion charges left, you can just plant that prophet as a holy site and it will give you faith generation all game long. It also counts for city-state quests. So if you capture someone else's prophet, and you know there's those annoying city-state quests they give you where they're like, you know, so-and-so wants you to generate a profit, but you don't have a religion, so you literally can't generate a profit. Well, if you capture someone else's profit, you can make that city-state quest. You can fulfill that city quest even though you're not able to do it another way. And if you're Sweden, you can use 3 of your profit charges, so you can go convert 3 cities with your profit and then gift the profit away, and you still get the full 90 influence bonus, which is pretty cool. What else? Oh, great profit generation. I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not. Let's go back and talk just briefly about this on the Excel sheet. So I'll upload this Excel sheet. I'll link it in the actual YouTube video itself, and then I'll also link it on I'll put it in my Filthy's cheat sheet folder, so on my shared drive, so you guys can all download that. This is the profit generation cost here. So right here, profits go up in cost based on the number you've generated before. And if you generate something from like Aegea Sophia, or if you use a Liberty finisher, it also counts towards the profit cost, although the Piety finisher doesn't. So if you finish Piety, you get an actual free profit. But let's say you hard generated 1 profit, that's your first one you founded a religion with, and then you built Aegea, your third profit is going to cost 335, not 201. And this cost goes up, it's the sum of the past 2 before it. So profit 3 costs as much as 1 and 2 combined, profit 4 costs as much as 3 and 2 combined, etc. You're going to get to a point where at some point it's not going to be worth getting a profit anymore, because your point of planting it means it's not going to generate the amount of faith it costs before the game ends. And late game, what you're trying to do with the faith, and this is a really important point of this, is you're trying to buy great scientists and great engineers. And if you don't have the faith for that, you're in a rough shape relative to other players, because I think I already talked a little bit about the great person cost, basically the great person counter, and now you're limited in the number of scientists you can have by the fact that each scientist costs more than the one before it. So there's going to be a limited number you can generate basically before the game runs out. Well, you can add to the number of scientists you can get by purchasing them directly with faith, and that doesn't push the great person timer back, and that means you can get more that way if you have faith and your opponents don't. And it also the way it works for that goes up very, very quickly. It's the same mechanic basically as the profit cost. It's the combination of the two before it when you're purchasing it, so that goes up very quickly because the base cost is so much higher. But if you can purchase multiple types of great people, if you finish rationalism and finish engineer, you might very realistically be able to purchase between 2 and 3 of each great person, and that gives you a really huge advantage in the late game that other players may not have who don't have as much faith generation as you. All right, so kind of a decent amount of information here. I don't think anything particularly earth-shattering. Probably a lot of you are nodding your heads along going, we know all this filthy, but this is, I see a lot of players misplaying the religious side of the game. It's like culture. It's another indirect resource that's not so clearly obvious of what it's doing, but it also, like culture, it's basically advancing your late game science game and your early game growth game, which is, again, another way of advancing science is growth. So hopefully this has been fairly helpful. Hopefully you guys have got some sense of what you're supposed to be doing with your religion. You are trying to be going into this, you're trying to decide when you're getting ready to found a religion, what am I realistically going to do with my religion? Is it going to be a religion that I can spread everywhere, or is it going to be a religion that's mostly my own cities? What selection of tenets can I pick that are going to be most beneficial for me and not beneficial to the people who are going to get my religion, or if they do get my religion, how I can make that more beneficial for me than for them. So it's something you should be considering in your religion games, and hopefully this has been helpful for that. So anyways, guys, yeah, I've been enjoying making the guides again. I'm glad to see such a strong response to the T2 Civ guide, and hopefully you guys will have this one be useful for you as well. So, cheers.